What an interesting session yet once again. Storytelling. Well, it so much coincides with the World Storytelling Day today as well. At Earth, you see, we're always on top of things and most relevant to the day. Now, as we talk about most relevant to the day, we are also moving into the conclusive session for this edition of Earth. And this one is again a very strong topic, very relevant to what is happening around us in the country. This one is titled as the Toolkit Saga, Bridging the Gulf Between Dissent and Sedition. It's a panel discussion. So let me go ahead and welcome in a very strong panel for this conclusive session. I have with us Mr. Anand Ranganathan, who obtained his BSc degree in chemistry from St. Stephen's College, Delhi, after which he left on a Nehru Centenary Scholarship for Cambridge, UK, where he obtained his BA in Natural Science, his MA and his PhD. Scientific contributions from his lab have been published in peer-reviewed journals like the Journal of Biological Chemistry, Chemistry and Biology, the Journal of Infectious Diseases and Nature and Communication. Along with him, we have Tehseen Poonawalla, who's an entrepreneur, activist, political analyst, co-anchor of Bhai vs. Bhai and a columnist. He is a keen observer of the emerging socio-political trends. Let me also welcome Dr. Krishan Chaudhary, who is the National President of the Bharatiya Krishak Samaj, New Delhi. He was the former chairman of the State Farms Corporation of India and Indian Sugarcane Development Council, Government of India, in addition to being the former director of NAFED and founding member of the Small Farmers Agri-Business Consortium. He has also authored a book by the name of Development Misplaced, which was published by esteemed Penguin publication in 2014. Joining this panel, we have Mr. Sai Deepak, who is an engineer turned law firm partner turned arguing counsel. Sai has been a litigator since July 2009. In June 2016, Sai founded the Law Chamber of Sai Deepak and set up practice as an arguing counsel. He's engaged by soliciting law firms and individual solicitors to appear before the Supreme Court of India, the Delhi High Court, the Bombay High Court, the Madras High Court, the Competition Commissions of India, and the Competition Appellate Tribunal, the Intellectual Property Appellate Board, and the Tax Tribunals. Along with him, we also have Mr. Sanjay, who's the former national spokesperson for the Indian National Congress. He is also the former president of All India Professionals Congress, Maharashtra. Lastly, we also have with us Mr. Ravinder Singh Cheema, president of the Arth Association, Punjab. Now, this session is indeed going to be a powerful one. And so we have a fantastic moderator, Mr. Abhinav Prakash, who is an assistant professor of economics at the Sri Ram College of Commerce, Delhi University. He's also a bilingual columnist at the Hindustan Times, Dainik Jagran and Swarajya, focusing primarily on socio-economic, political and caste issues. He's a fellow at the Asian Forum on Global Governance. And with this, we welcome our panelist and our moderator to take over this conclusive session. Here we go.
Thank you, Kanishk, for that kind introduction, and welcome audience to what promises to be the most hotly debated and lively session of the Earth Cultural Fest of this year. So I'm going to start with Tehseen Poonawalla directly with you because we're running out of time. We started a bit late. You are running out of time. You have to leave, I know. Tehseen, when we talk about this protest which is happening in the country, especially the farmers' protest, are you crossing the line between the dissent and sedition?
Absolutely not. For two reasons, that I think the farmers have a grievance, which is absolutely justified. Now, there will be many on this panel who may say, look, the farmers' demands may not be rational. And that is an argument on the opposite side that I'm willing to listen. But the fact of the matter is that this government misled its citizens and misled the Supreme Court of India and misled everybody by saying farmers were taking into confidence when they passed these laws, which were earlier ordinances. RTIs have showed that there's been no consultation, and these have been revealed by the government, with any farmer body or with anybody who's involved with farming with regards to these new laws. Secondly, there have been allegations on the farmers with regards to the funding, where they're getting the funding from, with regards to them being with having terrorist rings, allegations that were made into the Supreme Court but were not substantiated. I think the farmers are absolutely justified simply because the government misled people. All the farmers wanted was to come to Ram Leela Maidan and protest, and they were stopped. And I think that's where the problem started.
Okay. Sai Deepak, please clarify this thing for us. What exactly is dissent in India and what is sedition?
So I think there are 2 or 3 myths that need to be busted as far as the position of Indian law on sedition is concerned. I have heard often that sedition as such is a colonial import and therefore it does not deserve to be in Indian statute books. I've also been told often that the word sedition was originally proposed in the draft Article 13 of the Constitution, which ultimately became Article 19 of the Constitution. And then since it was deleted, the presence of sedition as a penal offense under Section 124A of the Indian Penal Code itself is an abomination, and a constitutional abomination is the typical argument that's been given. Over the last few weeks, I've been writing extensively on this particular issue, tracing the origin of this particular provision from 1870 onwards right until the constitutional debates. And each of these documents specifically shows that when sedition as a provision was retained in the Indian Penal Code at the time of the Constituent Assembly debates, the framers of the Constitution were crystal clear that sedition as a concept has been significantly diluted even by British Indian courts, specifically only to those acts which constitute anarchy or which are intended to constitute anarchy or which are intended to invoke or let's say inspire anarchy. Therefore, as far as India is concerned, both the Constituent Assembly debates and subsequently in the decision of the Supreme Court in 1962, the position that has been taken is very, very clear. Criticism of the government is not sedition. Any kind of disapproval of a legislative measure or a policy measure is not sedition. And if you ask for disobedience of a certain law, that amounts to challenge to the authority, the lawful authority of the government, and therefore that could border on sedition. But most importantly, if you specifically ask for uprooting of the edifice of the state itself, then it's no more a criticism that is being leveled against a specific regime or a specific point of view or a specific legislative measure. It goes much beyond that because it amounts to an attack on the structure itself, not on a particular body or not a particular regime. Regimes come and go, but structure is supposed to remain. That is effectively the basis of the Constitution. So any attack, which is an attack on the edifice itself, necessarily amounts to sedition. Anything short of that can constitute dissent and free speech, which is permissible in nature.
Okay, thanks for that definition. Ravinder, Sai Deepak has just said that protesting against the law is not sedition, that's dissent. But if you're attacking the symbols of the state, if you're threatening the survival of the state and the authority itself, that becomes the sedition. So what happened on 26th of January, when the symbol of the Indian state, the Red Fort itself, was attacked by the protesting farmers, do you think that was sedition?
Is there a question that's being put to me?
Ravinderji.
Ravinder. Oh.
Okay. I think the peaceful protest of the farmer was going on, and our procession was near the border of the Delhi. We want to celebrate the Republic Day in our own way, like farmer, tractor, and procession of a tractor. We have all banners, national flag on our tractor trolleys, and simultaneously our religious flag, which is respected in the Punjab, our Gurdwara, our Langar, and some places. When we come for any donation or service, we pick up our banner and work together. The main reason to go to Lal Killa, it was a conspiracy. Our main route was obstructed, and the route going to Lal Killa, that was open. and the public was going toward Lal Killa. But I say no harm to the national flag was done by any Protestant. Only our symbol of our religious place where we, when we come in the agitation, we also in one hand our national flag and in second hand our flag of our religion.
जी रविंदर जी, वो कॉन्स्पिरेसी भी हो, लेकिन क्या आप ये मानते हैं कि लाल किले को जिसने भी किया हो वो हरकत वहां पे, क्या वो सिडिशन था, वो क्या वो असॉल्ट था स्टेट पे, क्या वो फार्मर प्रोटेस्ट की लाइन को क्रॉस कर गया था, किसी ने भी किया हो?
No. We think it is not sedition. It is only a protest. Even we can protest inside the outside the Lal Killa. Lal Killa is a national property, and if any offices we can protest outside any office, then we can also protest outside the Lal Killa.
Sure. So Anand, do you agree with the Ravinder ji that targeting the symbol of the Indian state, Red Fort, is not sedition? Asking for help from the foreigners abroad is not sedition? Asking other countries to intervene in the India's internal matter is not, let's say, bordering on the sedition. Do you agree to this point?
Yeah, thanks very much, first of all, Abhinav, for having me on this lovely panel, and to the organizers of Earth. It's a fantastic event. And you're right, Tehseen is in a bit of a hurry because he has an emergency meeting with the Home Minister of Maharashtra. So we have to be very quick about this. This is regarding the events that have just been, that's just transpired. But let me come back to the topic. Tehseen started talking about the farm laws. This discussion is not about the farm laws or the validity or whether they're good or bad. We all have our views and we've expressed it over the last 3 months. This is specifically about dissent and sedition and the toolkit. And Abhinav, what you asked me about sedition, my views have been very clear on this since the beginning, that I am against this draconian sedition law. I think sedition should be considered lawful only if it poses a palpable, immediate and real threat to the country or to the breakup of the country. And this doesn't. Now, let me actually read very briefly what the law actually states. So I'm just going to read, and this has been deliberately kept so gray that everything can be included into being seditious. And that is the reason why all governments since independence have been invoking this and charging thousands and thousands of people under sedition. The UPA did it before 2014. The second UPA too, in fact, charged almost 12,000 people or 12,000 people were charged under sedition. So, and this has been completely ignored by this new Swedish report that has come out and that has said that central governments, quote unquote, rarely if ever censored views of people in India. So, obviously one needs to take all those reports with a pinch of salt. But here are the words. 124A sedition. Whoever by words either spoken or written, or by signs, or by visible representation, or otherwise, brings or attempts to bring into hatred or contempt, or excites or attempts to excite disaffection towards the government established by law in India, shall be punished with imprisonment for life, to which fine may be added, or with imprisonment which may extend to 3 years, to which fine may be added, or with fine. Now you see how gray it is. So whatever the gentleman previously was saying that this is not sedition, I may agree with that, but the law is expressly including almost everything that you may do, that might bring or attempt to bring into hatred or contempt the government established by law. So everything is included in there. And that is the reason why so many people have been charged under sedition. Under the UPA government, 8,000 protesters in Kodakulam nuclear plant were charged under sedition in a single day. So, these are the people who are now crying hoarse when BJP does the same thing. It is wrong that BJP is doing the same thing, but you can't just, be selective and say that this has been happening for the first time. So, my view is that nothing in the toolkit was seditious. I've said it before. B, having said that, the law itself will include everything, including hoisting of a flag illegally, as seditious. It's as simple as that.
May I come in?
You want to say something?
Yes. Anand, at the onset, I'm meeting Anil Deshmukh to see who is the BJP agent behind this. But jokes apart, I want to come to the serious issue of the topic. Anand, Abhinav actually asked me about the farm protests, and that's why I opined on that. But I counter with what you say, Anand, and there are two reasons for this. While it's fine, yes, the UPA did it and the BJP is doing it, is an argument to make, and arguments holds true. The fact is, in the 2019 election, the Congress had promised to do away with sedition. So the Congress was against sedition. Now, for your larger point that you're making about what constitutes sedition, Anand, I disagree even here with you, because in Kedarnath, the Honorable Supreme Court has absolutely defined what constitutes sedition, and the simple act of hoisting a flag, though I disagree with the way they hoisted the flag, does not constitute sedition. The act of challenging a government or even dissing out a government does not constitute sedition, has been made amply clear by the Supreme Court of India. This was in
can I rebut very quickly?
I'll come back to you, Anand. Okay. Let me go to Krishan Veer ji. Krishan Veer ji, जब यहाँ पे प्रोटेस्ट की बात हो रही है, टूल किट्स की बात हो रही है, हमने देखा दिशा रवि की जो टूल किट की बहुत चर्चा हुई थी यहाँ पे, वो जेल में भी थी. आपको ऐसा क्यों लगता है कि किसानों को अपने आंदोलन चलाने के लिए अंतरराष्ट्रीय स्तर नेटवर्क की टूल किट की आवश्यकता पड़ने लगी है?
अभिनव जी, किसी भी तरीके का किसी टूल किट की भारत के किसानों के आंदोलन को कोई आवश्यकता ना थी. आंदोलन आजादी से लेकर अब तक बहुत हुए हैं. 87 ऑनवर्ड्स मैंने भी कितने आंदोलनों में किसानों के भाग लिया है, लेकिन ऐसा पहली बार इस देश में देखा है कि अंतर्राष्ट्रीय ताकतें किसानों के मामले में इंटरफेयर करें. ये देश के हित में मुझे नहीं लगता है. सरकारें आती हैं, बदलती हैं, वो हमारा लोकतंत्र है. पक्ष और विपक्ष सभी दलों की पूरी जिम्मेदारी है देश के प्रति, क्योंकि लोकतंत्र हमारी सबसे बड़ी ताकत है. लेकिन यही ताकत सबसे बड़ी कमजोरी बन गई है जब अंतर्राष्ट्रीय ताकतें, चाहे वो कनाडा में मुद्दा उठाया गया हो, चाहे वो लंदन के अंदर उठाया जाए, चाहे वो हमारे एम्बेसी के बाहर गांधी जी की मूर्ति के पर साजिश की जाए, ये सब किसानों से संबंधित ना था और ना होना चाहिए. मेरा निजी विचार नहीं, देश के 86% उन गरीब किसानों का जो स्मॉल और मार्जिनल हैं, वो कोई व्यक्ति इससे सहमत नहीं हो सकता. और खास तौर से राष्ट्र के सम्मान के प्रतीक जो है लाल किला, वो राष्ट्र का सम्मान है, और राष्ट्र के सम्मान हो और सेना के गौरव का दिवस 26 जनवरी हो, उस पर अंतर्राष्ट्रीय ताकतें देश के खिलाफ इस तरीके की साजिश करवाएं, ये हम सब के लिए बहुत दुख और शर्मनाक बात है. कानून क्या कहता है मैं उसमें नहीं जाता, लेकिन भारत के नागरिकों की आत्मा की आवाज जो है वो यही कहेगी, चाहे पार्टी कोई भी हो, उसका कोई मतलब नहीं है. देश के किसानों ने इस देश की सेवा की है. किसानों के बेटे सेना पे लड़ते हैं. जब चीन और पाकिस्तान के सीमा पर हमारे ही बच्चे लड़ते हैं. मुझे दुख इस बात का भी है कि 26 जनवरी की घटना में दिल्ली पुलिस के 500 से ज्यादा जवानों के साथ जो घटना घटी है, उसके लिए हमारे मन को बहुत ठेस पहुंची है, और ये अच्छा नहीं, लोकतंत्र के लिए अच्छा नहीं. क्या आखिर वजह क्या है? देश में 14 करोड़ 30 लाख किसान हैं. हम किसके लिए? मैं पूछता हूं, भारतीय किसान यूनियन के अध्यक्ष रहे थे, आज इस दुनिया में नहीं है, चौधरी महेंद्र सिंह की कैद. वो पूरे जीवन तक हमारे साथ मिलकर कहते रहे बाजार में बोलना चाहिए, लेकिन आज वो मुद्दा नहीं है. आज वो मुद्दा नहीं है, कोई कानून का मुद्दा नहीं है. मुद्दा है राष्ट्र की अस्मिता का. मुद्दा है देश के किसानों का क्या दायित्व है इस देश के प्रति. क्या अंतर्राष्ट्रीय ताकतों के हाथ का खिलौना बनेंगे हम, या देश के प्रति हम वफादारी जैसी आज तक रही है. सभी धर्म और सभी जातियों के लोग इस देश में खेत और खेती में काम करते हैं. सभी दलों में तमाम किसान जो है तो समय समय पर पूरी तरीके से, चाहे कुछ भी है, समर्थन करते रहे, विरोध करते रहे, वो एक अलग बात है. लेकिन देश बड़ा है और उससे ज्यादा हमारे लिए कुछ भी नहीं है. देश और देश के नागरिकों का यही दायित्व.
जी कृष्ण जी. संजय जी, कमिंग टू यू. कृष्ण जी बात कर रहे हैं राष्ट्रीय अस्मिता की. We are talking about sedition, we are talking about dissent. How do you see these three things separately?
Well, I think it is important to take a very clear, categorical stance here. And I will totally agree with my friend Anand and say that the sedition law ought to be scrapped. I've heard all the speakers, including a very passionate outburst from Mr. Chaudhary. But I'm sorry to say, Mr. Chaudhary, but calling the farmers Khalistanis and terrorists is no business of the state or any government in this country. As a citizen of this country, Mr. Chaudhary, you and I both have our fundamental rights under the Constitution. And we have a right, therefore, to demand it with an equal degree of confidence and pride. And I want to make a point here. Very, very clearly again, no ambiguity at all. The British did bring the IPC section 124. What was the objective behind this law? Was to actually ensure that India's freedom movement, led by people like Mahatma Gandhi, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, and Pandit Nehru, and all the other stalwarts like Sardar Patel, would be thwarted. Who was it used against? It was used against Mahatma Gandhi and Lokmanya Tilak. They were actually convicted. The question, Abhinav, is this, that today even the British have discarded this antediluvian law. Why are we keeping it here? Why are we so proud of this colonial legacy? Because the truth is very simple, and I will make it very bipartisan here. The BJP is doing what the Congress also has done in the past, what some other political parties have done it in the past as well. Don't forget there are other non-BJP, non-Congress parties in different states that have also used these tools to harass an ordinary citizen. I'll give you an example. You talked of Toolkit, Disha Ravi, a 21 or a 22-year-old girl in Bangalore. You have the Delhi police actually going down to arrest her without a transit warrant. Should we talk about here what the judge said on that issue? She was given a bail at the earliest. There are many other people who have not been so fortunate enough. And the judge said that is a government's vanity which gets wounded when somebody protests. So are we so thin-skinned? Mr. Chaudhary is waxing eloquent on Antarashtriya Sazish. There is no Antarashtriya Sazish, Chaudhary ji. We live in a globalized world. आज हम भी दूसरे देशों में कुछ उनके जो मसले होते हैं ना, हम भी वहां टिप्पणी करते हैं. उसको दखल अंदाजी नहीं कहते हैं कोई. हम प्रजातंत्र हैं भैया, प्रजातंत्र हैं. और इसमें आपका भी हक है, मेरा भी हक है. सरकार की आलोचना करना, समीक्षा करना किसी को देशद्रोही नहीं बना देता. And let me tell you the truth behind section 124. Why will the BJP and the Congress not repeal it? You know why? Because they are not interested in actually prosecuting anyone, because how many people have got convicted? The objective is to make sure that Mr. Cheema, Tehseen, Anand, Mr. Chaudhary, Mr. JSD, Abhinav, all of us actually get scared of the consequences of a FIR against us. So you have a sedition against Rajdeep Sardesai. You have a sedition against my good colleague, Mr. Shashi Tharoor. I mean, how ridiculous can we get? And is India, the great democracy of the world, going to be frightened of a Rihanna, of a Greta Thunberg? I mean, how preposterous is this entire debate? And I want to end by adding a line, because I'm sure you want to get the other guests in quickly. What is the fact? The fact is that the process is used to intimidate and frighten people. Ask an ordinary person of India, Abhinav, if you get an FIR, if the police lodges a complaint against you, the harassment, the mental harassment is supposed to result in self-censorship. I get so scared that then I don't see anything at all, because who wants to go to the cops and go to a judicial or a police custody? It is what is called as the chilling effect of law. And therefore, if you look at the hard data, I don't want to bore you with the data, the conviction rates are ridiculous, because I don't think even the party in power wants prosecution. They just want to scare the hell out of you. And therefore, I do believe that as long as India keeps calling protesters and dissenters as anti-national, that has become the shibboleth of our times, the slogan of our times. No political party is going to remove the sedition law, but it ought to be dumped because it is archaic. And in India, we should have the confidence that yes, there is a constitution, that has certain restrictions on the freedom of speech. Maybe we can come up with a new law. But to use the section 124 as it is, I think is absolutely against freedom of speech.
Sure, Sanjay sir. According to you, he's saying, Sanjay ji is saying that we cannot grant protesters or the dissenters anti-national. But when we see like what happened in the Balakot strike, there were many people in India who were literally parroting the wartime Pakistani propaganda, asking for Nobel Peace Prize for the Imran Khan, who was behind the terror attacks in India. At least he was the Prime Minister of Pakistan. And in the case of CA bill, we have seen that there were massive widespread communal riots in Bengal, in other parts of the country before it happened in Delhi. So when did we started justifying violence or, let's say, propagating the enemy propaganda in the name of dissent against the government? Tehseen, this is to you.
So I don't know of anyone in mainstream political parties, and because this is a political discussion, that asked for Imran Khan to get a Nobel Peace Prize. Surely the odd person somewhere may have had an opinion, but that opinion is as inconsequential as any other opinion. The fact of the matter was that even if somebody believed, and let's assume that they believe that the Pathankot tragedy or the Pulwama tragedy was done to benefit the government, or whatever the line that they did believe in was, that did not constitute violence. And as long as it did not constitute immediate violence, it is extremely clear that that's not sedition. That is stupid. That is letting your country down. That perhaps may be demoralizing your force, but that is not sedition. And you cannot call that sedition. I am sorry. Let's come back to the farmers' protest, because that's where this whole toolkit and this debate has started from. And today, the Honorable Prime Minister used the idea of this toolkit in Assam politically. The fact of the matter is, I concur with what Sanjay said and earlier with what Anand said with regards to sedition and how it's being used. The fact is that a toolkit, a public document where a 21-year-old girl publicly edited something, was used and is being used by the Prime Minister of the country in an election speech to tell the people of Assam, look, there's a conspiracy against tea growers. Now, you may call that a political masterstroke, but somebody's suffering because of that. And that suffering happened to be that, the person suffering there happened to be that 21-year-old girl. She was called all sorts of names. And there have been many other dissenters who have been called all sorts of names. And I think that is where we need to draw the line. When the government starts using this propaganda to benefit itself politically, and then uses the law because it can to harm somebody else, I think that's where we need to draw a line.
So, Sai Deepak, coming to you, we have the constitutional patriots in this country these days, and they say that courts cannot be trusted upon because judiciary is not displaying judicial barbarism, or that parliament cannot be trusted because it has been colonized. The law has been colonized by the fascists. So what is wrong if these people are trying to marshal the international solidarity with the champions of democracy to reclaim Republic of India and Indian democracy? What's wrong in that?
So I think there are 2 or 3 factual corrections which are warranted, especially with respect to the points made by Mr. Sanjay, because factually and historically, his understanding of Section 124A is completely incorrect. Section 124A was not primarily brought in to curb the independence movement. I think Mr. Jha must read up the history on this particular issue. It was brought in to curb the rise of radical Wahhabism between 1863 and 1870. That is the express intent of the British Parliament that was expressed in the legislative debates before Section 124A was brought in. That's point number 1. Second, I think we must also ask ourselves, when we keep saying, oh, no, this is a colonial institution, this is a colonial provision, this is a colonial draconian provision that must be junked and this must be jettisoned. I think we must simply read what is it that Sri K.M. Munshi said specifically with respect to this particular issue. He said that sedition as understood by the present generation is different from sedition as was introduced in 1870. And therefore, he specifically said, any act which undermines the security of or tends to overthrow the state must be treated as sedition. And the word sedition in the original language of Article 19 was replaced with these words as of 1950, which is why subsequently, as Tehseen points out in 1962 in Kedarnath Singh, these 2 specific pillars were used to interpret Section 124A. So when Anand or Mr. Jha read out the bare provision of Section 124A, they proceed under the assumption that this provision has not received judicial treatment, which has significantly diluted the scope of the provision. That's point number one. Point number two, I do not disagree with the fact that governments tend to misuse a certain provision. There is no doubting the fact that every government misuses this particular provision. But to say that we must not have the concept of sedition altogether, we must altogether junk the concept of treason against the state, I'm sorry to say, is to effectively bury our head in a 60-foot, let's say, grave, so to speak, and behave like ostriches. Any number of jurisdictions, the so-called civilized jurisdictions that we keep looking to for judicial guidance on both sides of the Atlantic and even down under, specifically have provisions relating to sedition. Therefore, to make it seem as if India is the only backward, regressive country that still subscribes to the concept of sedition, I'm sorry to say, is to put on stark display our ignorance of the provision of the law across jurisdictions. Three, the overall attempt, I don't think it makes sense for us to simply latch on the concept of a conspiracy merely because there are certain international actors involved. However, the question is simply this. What is the intent of these actors in trying to normalize a certain terrorist movement which was buried significantly for the last 20 years at least, or 20 to 30 years, and which was not in the public debate, and suddenly that particular movement has achieved a certain degree of normalization? I will be the last person, and I will still not be the person to blame any farmer of being a Khalistani supporter. That is too much of a stretch. I will not even use these words for Disha Ravi because I don't think it makes sense to brand her as a Khalistani supporter. So as far as the toolkit is concerned, the toolkit in itself is not proof of sedition, but toolkit being used as part of a larger, let's say, machination, so to speak, is the larger question. Nobody accused the toolkit itself of being an act of sedition, and people must simply get their facts right on that particular issue. The question was, what is the overall intent here? What kind of slogans were being raised? And I refuse to buy the fact that when somebody says we were merely bringing tractors for a procession to celebrate Republic Day in our own sweet air farmers, I'm sorry, that doesn't cut ice, that doesn't hold water even one moment. So we must be aware of what is it that we are saying. We have to realize one thing for a fact. Protests are different from any protest that specifically aims to settle law and legal processes on the streets. When somebody says, replace the parliament with a certain mobocracy which decides the course of legislative processes or the manner in which a certain policy is to be settled on the streets, I'm sorry to say, is nothing but an attack on the structure itself. Farmers have 100% right to protest, and the moment they protest...
Abhinav, can I make a point here, please?
But they must certainly respect the fact that they cannot use violence against anyone who is discharging his duty as a public servant. They cannot attack the symbols of the state. And no farmer deemed it fit to step into the picture when the Indian flag was being torn down or when the Indian flag was being passed around like it was trash. I'm sorry to use this particular word. So when they do that, it certainly raises suspicions as to what is the intent here. If their intention was to maintain the purity of the particular protest, then infiltrators into the protest must have been weeded out. They should have been kicked out. This was not what happened. Therefore, people have legitimate reasons and legitimate doubts with respect to the conduct of certain section of farmers. I will not blame the entire protesting farmers under any circumstance.
Sure, Sai Deepak. Sanjay ji, one minute, please.
I want to quickly respond because he took my name, the gentleman who spoke before me. We all know the history. Let us not be so presumptuous as to believe that there is a monopoly on understanding what is sedition law. We are talking about the fact that how was the law being abused. I think he missed the complete point of this debate. The complete point of this debate is not the law, is the abuse of the law. And a lot of us here understand that, yes, there can be an attack against the state. So you need to either amend the law or Parliament can come up, or hopefully maybe the Supreme Court will probably strike the law and force another discussion on it. But to sit here and pontificate that this is a law which has to be there in its current state is to actually basically bat for everyone who believes that the state is more important than the citizen. Now, since, I have not bothered to look down, but I'm very well prepared for this debate. So let me tell the gentleman here concerned some hard data. 405 Indians, just hear me out, please, Abhinav, let me finish. Because you have also seemed a little sympathetic towards the sedition law. I need to point this out for the benefit of the viewers. I'm not talking to just you, I'm talking to the viewers. 96%, hear me out, 96% of the sedition cases filed against 405 Indians were for criticizing politicians and governments after 2014. And the majority of those 96% of the cases happened in BJP ruled states. Now, this is data, my dear friends, coming from the National Crime Research Bureau. This is not my spin. This is not my hyperbole, which is the purpose of this debate, that political parties abuse sedition to frighten you so that you don't have your freedom of speech. And then they will find some sympathizers who will come and give a legal spin, but actually never answer the fundamental issue.
Abhinav ji, 1 minute.
I'll come to Ravinder ji. Ravinder ji,
Abhinav ji,
कृष्ण जी मैं आपके पास आऊंगा, 1 मिनट रविंदर जी के पास जाने दीजिए। रविंदर जी, ये जो आंदोलन चल रहा है, ये किसानों का हो और आढ़तियों का हो, जिसका भी आंदोलन हो, लेकिन ये कहाँ तक जस्टिफाई होता है कि टूल किट सर्कुलेट की जाए पूरी दुनिया में, कि दूसरे देशों में भारत की एम्बेसी पे घेराव किया जाए, वहां पे हंगामा खड़ा किया जाए, या भारत की जो कंपनियां हैं, जो कॉर्पोरेट्स हैं, उनको टारगेट किया जाए, इनका बायकॉट किया जाए, या फिर लोग कनाडा में या न्यूजीलैंड में समर्थन में बोल रहे हैं बिल के, उनके ऊपर हमले किए जाएं। ये कौन सी इसके बारे में क्या कहना है?
देखो अभिनव जी, मैं एक बात स्पष्ट करनी चाहता हूं आपको सबसे पहले, कि ये टूल किट जिसको बोला गया, ये टूल किट तो है ही नहीं, अब ये प्रूव हो चुकी है, कोर्ट ने भी कह दिया है, आप भी सब पैनलिस्ट कह रहे हैं। मैं एक चीज जो है स्पष्ट करनी चाहता हूं, और आप सबकी जानकारी में होगा भी, कि पूरी दुनिया में किसान की रिस्पेक्ट की जाती है हर कंट्री में, और जितने डेवलप कंट्री हैं उनमें किसानी का जो धंधा है, ये लोग छोड़कर दूसरे कारोबार, बिजनेस, जॉब्स लेते हैं, किसानी से लोग निकल रहे हैं। वहां पे अगर किसी ऑफिसर के पास, अगर किसी ब्यूरोक्रेट के पास, किसी पॉलिटिशियन के पास कोई फार्मर आता है अपनी ग्रीवेंस लेकर, वो मतलब जैसे जापान में टोपी से रिस्पेक्ट करते हैं, कहीं खड़ा होकर रिस्पेक्ट करते हैं, कहीं झुककर किसान को रिस्पेक्ट दी जाती है, ऐसी रिस्पेक्ट जो है किसान के लिए पूरी दुनिया में है। और जब पंजाब में और हरियाणा में और बाकी प्रोविंसेस जो हमारे नॉर्थ के हैं, जैसे यूपी है, राजस्थान है, एमपी है, इन स्टेटों में जो फार्मर मतलब जो हमारा खेती का धंधा है, यही मेन व्यवसाय है यहाँ का, या इन प्रोविंसेस का मेन व्यवसाय ही यही है। और इसी पे इस देश का जो है वो आर्थिकता टिकी है, इस देश की सामाजिक जो मतलब हम कह लें कि पूरा समाज इन पे टिका हुआ। तो हमारे किसानों ने अगर कोई मूवमेंट शुरू की, अब इस मूवमेंट की रियलिटी क्या है और इसके कंसिक्वेंसेस क्या होंगे, ये तो आने वाला समय बताएगा। लेकिन ग्रीवेंसेस थी और इतनी बड़े लेवल पे ये मतलब जो है मूवमेंट बनी, तो इसकी हमदर्दी, आपने एक पहला बंद देखा होगा जो 25 सितंबर का बंद हुआ था जी, पूरे देश में वो बंद हुआ, वॉलंटरली बंद किया लोगों ने। फार्मर कहाँ दिल्ली में जाकर बंद करा सकते हैं जी, कहाँ मद्रास में? तो वो भी एक रिस्पेक्ट थी, फार्मर को जो रिस्पेक्ट लोगों ने दी कि अगर फार्मर के साथ कोई एक्सेस हो रही है तो देन वी शुड पे रिस्पेक्ट टू फार्मर। लेकिन ये रिस्पेक्ट फार्मर को हमारे पॉलिटिकल जो हमारी गवर्नमेंट है उनको भी देनी चाहिए थी। अब जहां तक आप सेडिशन की बात करते हैं, उन्होंने केवल एक हमदर्दी की है फार्मर से, उनकी टूल किट, कोई टूल किट नहीं है, सेडिशन तो है ही नहीं। वो एक हमदर्दी के लिए उन्होंने प्रोग्राम बनाया कि हम इकट्ठे होकर इकट्ठे एक वॉइस रेज करें इन फेवर ऑफ द फार्मर। तो उन्होंने अपना वो प्लान बनाया, हमारी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है, हम फाइट कर रहे हैं, हम भी प्लान बनाते हैं कि हमने इस दिन को जो है चुनना है, उस दिन हम स्लोगन देंगे, उस दिन हम रोड जाम करेंगे। ये तो चलता ही है जी, और जब कोई प्रोटेस्ट चलते हैं तो उसमें सेडिशन तो था ही नहीं। दूसरी बात मैं ये कहनी चाहता हूं कि जो किसान लाल किले पे गए, वहां जो हमारा नेशनल ध्वज वहां मतलब लहरा रहा था, वहां तक तो पहुंच गए थे जी वो। अगर उसकी ह्यूमिलेशन को करनी होती तो वहां वो हजारों की गिनती में थे, उनका ये पर्पज नहीं था जी, वो रिस्पेक्ट करने वाले थे सभी। उनको इसकी जानकारी नहीं थी कि तिरंगे के साथ अगर हम किसान का भी झंडा लगा देंगे, झंडे 2 लगे हैं वहां पे, जो तिरंगे का झंडा है वो भी साथ में लगता रहे, किसान का झंडा लगा और एक हमारा जो धार्मिक चिन्ह है वो झंडा लगा। कहीं कोई खालिस्तान का झंडा नहीं है, कोई खालिस्तान का नाम भी नहीं था।
रविंदर जी, वो बात ठीक है, झंडे की जानकारी नहीं थी, लेकिन इतनी जानकारी तो थी कि पुलिस वालों को इतनी बेदर्दी से मारना नहीं है, वहां पे इतनी
नहीं। देखो ये मैं आपको एक बात बताता हूं, पुलिस को जो मारपीट हुई है, मेरे ख्याल 1-2 इंसिडेंट में हमने देखा है कि पुलिस को भी मारपीट हुई है, लेकिन जब ऐसा कोई इंसिडेंट होता है तो कुछ ना कुछ लोग जो हैं वो, देखो वहां सभी सिटीजन जो है वो इक्वली एजुकेटेड भी नहीं होते हैं, कुछ ना कुछ हो जाता है, लेकिन जितना मतलब पुलिस के बारे में बोला गया, अरे 200 किसान जो उनकी तो डेथ हो गई जी, उनके तो परिवारों के लिए बहुत बड़ा मसला बन गया। ये तो केवल इंजर्ड हुए ना, 2 दिन के बाद वो अपनी ड्यूटी पर चले गए, तो इसका मतलब ये था कि ज्यादा इंजरी उनको नहीं हुई थी, लेकिन फिर भी हम कहते हैं कि वो कोई अच्छी बात नहीं थी जिसने भी हमारे साथी ने की। लेकिन एक एक किसान को 12-12 पुलिस वाले लाठियों से पीट रहे हैं, उसका जिक्र नहीं किया किसी ने। एक एक किसान के महिलाओं को मतलब जो है पीटा गया, उसका भी जिक्र नहीं किया गया। तो मैं तो एक बात कहता हूं जी, देखो हम देशभक्त जमात से हैं, किसान सबसे बड़ा देशभक्त है, इसके बारे में सेडिशन का लफ्ज जो है ना, ये बहुत बड़ा पाप है। किसान ने कभी भी ऐसा सोचना नहीं है और कोई भी किसान ऐसा सोचेगा नहीं। देखो सेडिशन का जो वर्ड है, इसकी टेक्निकल डेफिनेशन जो भी लॉयर दे रहे हैं, आपके पास एक्सपर्ट दे रहे हैं, उसमें मैं दखल नहीं दूंगा। सेडिशन का जो जरूरत है उसको रिपील तो नहीं करना चाहिए, हर देश को जरूरत है जी, ये कोई हमारे देश में सेडिशन का लॉ नहीं है, पूरे मतलब दुनिया में लॉ होता है। अगर कोई हमारे देश के खिलाफ कोई कार्रवाई होगी तो वहां पे हो, लेकिन हमारे नागरिकों के लिए सेडिशन का प्रयोग किया जाए, इससे बड़ा कोई पाप नहीं होगा। अपना कोई नागरिक, अपने हिंदुस्तान का नागरिक जो आपके लिए अन्न उपज रहा है, अपने लोगों के मतलब दिन रात जो है वो खेतों में काम कर रही है, उसके लिए हमने सेडिशन का प्रयोग किया। और इससे भी मैं आपको कहता हूं, हम आड़तियां हैं, हम बिजनेस करते हैं, किसानी भी करते हैं। हमारे जितने ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में जो प्रोटेस्ट कर रहे थे, इनकम टैक्स की रेट डाली गई, वहां सेडिशन नहीं लगा, वो टूल यूज हो गया। इसके अलावा जो हमारे किसान हैं जो बाहर से आते हैं, उन पर दूसरा लाभ पीढ़ी का जो है वो लग गया। ये सेडिशन करनी नहीं है। जितनी भी गवर्नमेंट है, जैसे ब्रिटिश यूज करते थे वैसे मिस्टर कांग्रेस ने किया, वैसे ये गवर्नमेंट कर रही है और स्टेट गवर्नमेंट भी कर रही है। हमारी पंजाब स्टेट ने खुद मेरे बिजनेस प्लेसेस पे रेड की, और मैं वो डिटेल करूं आपको कितना नुकसान हमारा उसने किया, सब अनलॉफुली। तो ये कोई काम नहीं कर पावर में आता है। ऐसी प्रवृत्ति जो है, इसके लिए कोर्ट को मतलब जो है ना, इसमें पहल करनी चाहिए। ऐसे केसों में 2-2 साल की सुनवाई, 4-4 साल की सुनवाई नहीं होनी चाहिए, इसकी फास्ट ट्रैक सुनवाई होनी चाहिए, ताकि गवर्नमेंट को ये टूल यूज करने से पहले डर लगे कि 1 महीने के बाद जो है इसका निर्णय आ जाएगा।
पॉइंट टेकन। कृष्ण जी, आपके पास आते हैं, जैसे कि अभी रविंद्र जी बोल रहे थे कि दुनिया भर में किसान हैं, उनकी अपनी समस्या है, वो भी अपनी समस्या उठाते हैं। तो इसमें क्या खराबी है कि अगर जर्मनी का किसान या अमेरिका के किसान जो है, या कहीं और का किसान भारत के किसान के साथ खड़ा होता है, क्योंकि जो वो भी एमएनसीज जो हैं वो भी अंतर्राष्ट्रीय कंपनियां हैं, तो क्या अंतर्राष्ट्रीय किसान सॉलिडारिटी में ऐसी क्या खराबी है कि उसे राष्ट्रीय अस्मिता को ठेस पहुंच रही है?
देखिए, जब हम डेवलप्ड वर्ल्ड की बात करते हैं और भारत के किसानों की बात करते हैं तो उसमें बहुत अंतर है। यूएस में कितने लोग खेती करते हैं? 5 लाख, 6 लाख, 7 लाख। यूरोप में 3 से 4% लोग खेती करते हैं, और बाकी स्थिति अलग है। वहां के फाइनेंशियल कंडीशंस अलग है, भारत के किसानों की आर्थिक स्थिति अलग है। हमारा अपना कल्चर है, अपना एग्रीकल्चर का सिस्टम है। हम 250 के करीब फसलें इस देश में पैदा करते हैं। कैसे हम हर तरीके से कैसे करें? लेकिन एक बात का मुझे बहुत अफसोस है कि ग्रेटा थनबर्ग, ये हमने कभी नाम नहीं सुने थे, मियां खलीफा, अब ये अखबारों में पढ़ के ये सब सुनने को आया। इन लोगों को जो पैसे लेके ट्वीट करते हैं, ये भारत को बदनाम करने के लिए जो ये लोग आए मैदान में, इनका उद्देश्य क्या था? किसानों की सेवा करना, भारत की देशभक्ति और भारत की सेवा करना। मैं पूछता हूं, सिख फॉर जस्टिस ने अभी यूएन को पैसा दिया है, मेरे किसी मित्र ने अभी इस सवाल को नहीं उठाया, चंदा देंगे भारत को बदनाम करने के लिए संयुक्त राष्ट्र में। क्या ये भारत के किसानों के हित में सवाल उठाया जा रहा है? यूएन के अंदर पैसा भारत के किसानों के हित के लिए दिया जा रहा है, ये भारत को बदनाम करने के लिए दिया जा रहा है। जब भारत के किसानों पर जब टैरिफ लगाने की बात होती है, तब कहां चली जाती है अंतर्राष्ट्रीय ताकतें? जब भारत के ऊपर तरह तरह के इंटरनेशनल पॉइंट्स जो एक्सपोर्ट पे उठते हैं, क्वालिटी पर उठते हैं, भारत के किसानों के उत्पाद पर सैनिटरी कंडीशंस और फाइटोसैनिटरी या क्वारंटाइन के सवाल उठते हैं, तब कहां जाती है इंटरनेशनल फोर्सेस? तब भारत के किसानों के उत्पादों के लिए कोई साथ नहीं होता। ये सब कहने की बात है कि सॉलिडरिटी है, इनका सबका अपना एजेंडा है, सबका अपना बिजनेस है, कोई सॉलिडरिटी नहीं है, सबके अपने इंटरेस्ट। हमें अपने एग्रीकल्चर, अपने किसानों की स्थिति को सब लोग जानते हैं, हमारे कोई कम जानता है, कोई ज्यादा जानता है, सबको पता है। लेकिन ये कहना कि ये देखिए, एक मिनट, मैं सुन रहा था आपको, हमारी अपने एक्ट हैं, अपनी प्रॉब्लम्स हैं। सरकार कोई भी हो, तमाम लोग कहते चले आ रहे हैं कि वे बिचौलिए शोषण करते हैं। वो यह मुद्दा ही नहीं है कि किसान को 3-4 रुपए किलो बेचना है और 4 घंटे बाद 25 रुपए बिकता है, वो कोई मुद्दा नहीं है। मुद्दा सिर्फ ये है कि जिस तरीके से साजिश करके घटनाओं को अंजाम दिया गया, 25 तारीख को दिल्ली पुलिस के साथ बात करके, पूरा 24 को बात करके, कितनी मीटिंग्स करके सब तय किया गया कि बहुत पीसफुल रहेगा, कोई दिक्कत नहीं है। आखिर ये कौन सी फोर्सेज हैं जिन्होंने इसको, देश को हिंसा में झोंकने के लिए, आग लगाने के लिए काम किया? उनका क्या इंटरेस्ट है? उनका क्या हमारे साथ और पंजाब के भाई और उड़ीसा के भाई और हरियाणा और राजस्थान के किसान भाइयों के लिए वो आए हैं? नहीं, उनका कोई उद्देश्य नहीं है। उनका उद्देश्य सिर्फ हमारे देश में हिंसा भड़काना है, जो हमारे हित में नहीं है। और एक बात और मैं बता दूं आपको कि जो हुआ है, देश के आम जनमानस के मन में जो सम्मान और प्यार देश के किसानों के लिए था, उस 26 तारीख की घटना ने उसको नुकसान पहुंचाया। इसमें कोई दो राय नहीं है, मैं तो स्वीकार करता हूं कि नुकसान पहुंचाया, क्योंकि लोगों को ये उम्मीद नहीं थी कि इस तरीके की घटना कभी इस देश में किसानों के नाम पे की जाएगी। किसने की, कैसे की, ये एक जांच का मुद्दा है। लेकिन अंतर्राष्ट्रीय साजिश और इंटरनेशनल फोर्सेस तय करें और वो यूएन में भारत को बदनाम करने के लिए करें, हमारी एम्बेसीज के बाहर करें, ये सब क्या है? सिख फॉर जस्टिस जो बैंड है वो क्या है? उसका क्या मतलब है? हमारे देश के मामलों में जो है, उनका उद्देश्य अलग है। उनका उद्देश्य भारत के किसान नहीं हो सकता। ना हमारे आड़ती हो सकते हैं, ना हमारे मुनीम हो सकते हैं, ना हमारे पल्लेदार हो सकते हैं, कोई नहीं हो सकता। ये देश का समाज है और व्यापारी और किसान ये सब मिलके ही चला रहे हैं, इस देश को मिलके ही चलाएंगे। हाँ, सिस्टम में सुधार की जरूरत हो सकती है, बाजार खोलने की मांग हम लोग बहुत लंबे समय से कर रहे हैं, इसमें कोई बात नहीं है। हम बराबर कह रहे हैं कि भाई कानून में सुधार हो, किसान के खाते में पैसा जाए, ये सब चीजें एक अलग मुद्दा। लेकिन देश के खिलाफ जो कुछ हो रहा है और जो कुछ हुआ है, उससे हमारा नुकसान है। देश की छवि खराब हुई है और किसानों की इमेज को धब्बा लगा, ये अच्छा नहीं है। हम कह रहे ये कैसे कह सकते हैं सरकार ने बात नहीं की? सरकार ने 12 बार मीटिंग की है, 45 घंटे बात की है, हम लोगों के मुद्दे नहीं सुलझ पाए, वो बात ठीक है, लेकिन बात तो हुई है। और अभी भी सरकार ने कहा कि भाई आप अपना लिखित में दीजिए तो सरकार उसको कंसीडर करेगी। तो ये हमारा अधिकार है, आंदोलन करना अधिकार है, मांग करना अधिकार है, सरकारों को सुनना और सरकारों को समाधान करना उनका नैतिक दायित्व है, सरकार कोई भी हो। लेकिन हमारा ये बिल्कुल कतई ये हम लोगों को नहीं कर सोचना चाहिए कि राष्ट्र के विरोध में अंतर्राष्ट्रीय ताकतें हमारे देश के खिलाफ कोई काम करें और हिंसा भड़काने काम करें, वो तो बहुत ही ज्यादा नुकसानदायक है, हमारे लिए भी है और देश के लिए भी है। हिंसा किसी के लिए अच्छी नहीं।
चौधरी साहब, चौधरी
Yes, I have a lot of respect for Chaudhary Saab and his point of view, but I with humility differ with him, and I have to make a couple of fundamental points. I'm only quoting what Chaudhary Saab said here. He said, look, Greta Thunberg and etc. they've taken money, Mia Khalifa he named, have taken money to do these tweets. There simply exists no evidence of this. This is the kind of, end of the day, again, Mr. Chaudhary says, the government is talking to the farmers. Yes, they've spoken 11 times, but the government lied to the people of India and to the Honorable Supreme Court by saying that these laws were enacted after taking the farmers into confidence, but the RTI subsequently showed that no consultation took place. Now, one intellectual point that is made is, can an act of parliament be challenged on the streets? Well, that is what democracy is about. Violently, no. But of course, an act of parliament can be challenged. It can be challenged on the streets. It can be challenged on the court. May I make an intellectual point? And it's something that I want to leave you all to ponder. The Honorable Supreme Court, before whose majesty all of us bow, have put these laws on hold. They haven't struck them down. They haven't upheld them. Now, isn't that also wondering where the Supreme Court has taken these laws? Under what jurisdiction has the Supreme Court kept them on hold? Either you strike them down if they are unconstitutional, or you say, no, look, the laws are fine. If people want to protest, they can protest. If Parliament wants to uphold it, upholds it. Under what benchmark has the Honorable Supreme Court, another sovereign body, kept the decision of another sovereign body, the Parliament, on hold? So look, at the end of the day, these are challenges before us as a nation, as a democracy. We need to look at it. One final point. When people like Rihanna, Greta Thunberg, or Sanjay, or Anand, or Abhinav, or Tehseen comment, we may not necessarily know about the farmers' issue. That is fine. They are not commenting on the farmers' issue. They're commenting on the fact that internet is being suspended, that human rights are being violated, that democracy is under threat. Maybe it's their perception, but that is what they're commenting about. All of us stood up for George Floyd. All of us stood up for a lot of issues, for human rights abuses in Pakistan, for example. And that's where we live. We live in a globalized society where we must stand up for human rights. If we are duty bound to stand up for human rights anywhere across the world, I think running such people down, I think we're doing injustice to this great civilization called India and to the world as large. Mahatma Gandhi was an inspiration to Martin Luther King continents away. Nobody called Martin Luther King a toolkit guy, or said, why is he inspired by Gandhi? Gandhi started the struggle in South Africa. We didn't call Gandhi names. So let's be rational about this.
Sure, Tehseen. But let me come to Anand, who has been waiting very patiently.
I'm so sorry, Anand. I'm so sorry. I apologize. As you know, I have a meeting. I have to take it up. I will take your leave. I'm so sorry. Thank you so
you
much.
can't. You can't leave now because I was about to comment on you. You have to stay for another 30 seconds.
I'll hear you and leave.
Okay, Anand, so when it comes to the government, as Ravinder ji is saying, they have their own toolkit of CBI, income tax, ED. The corporates can have their own toolkit. They can manipulate the system. So what is wrong if the citizens are also creating their own toolkit to challenge or to champion their interest or to challenge the state or the government?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, I don't find anything particularly wrong in the toolkit. I mean, these are just basically my personal opinion, brainwash people trying to disrupt a democratic system, and they are well within their rights to do so. But I need to make 3 points here very quickly. I'm very heartened by what Sanjay said. I completely agree with him. As I say that, you know, if I'm not in jail right now, it is because the state has decided I need not be jailed. It's as simple as that in this country. And that's the fact. And we've seen this time and again. And as far as Tehseen, before he goes, I cannot, resist saying this, that there is a reason why we all love Tehseen. You know, he's so endearing, because on the one hand, when he says homeopathy is quackery, on the other hand, he dishes out these sugar pills. Now, there is a reason why I say, Tehseen, that, you know, the BJP is a disaster at perception, whereas the Congress is a master at, you know, deception. And the reason for that is that Tehseen said, yes, Anand, right. Congress also had charged thousands of people under sedition like BJP is doing now. I completely agree with you, Anand. But remember, before the 2019 general elections, Congress said we are going to remove the sedition law, which is true. But Tehseen forgets to say that after 2019, in dozens of cases in Congress governments, they have put the sedition charge. In fact, one ridiculous case is in Chhattisgarh, is ruled by the Congress, where a man complained on a Facebook post about a power cut, and he was charged with sedition. And let me not go to what happened in Rajasthan, where sedition charge was put on someone who almost quit Congress and then joined BJP, but didn't, thankfully, because of maneuverings of Tehseen. But there is a final point I want to make out here, and that is concerning what the magnificent erudite Sai said. He's absolutely right. In fact, when I quoted the sedition law, I quoted it, chapter and verse. But what he says is, over the years, through the auspices of the Supreme Court, it has been diluted, which is also absolutely fine. But the problem, Sai, is that the governments deliberately ignore the dilution of this sedition charge by the Supreme Court or by other knowledgeable judges. They go by the chapter and verse as it stands. So Sanjay Jha is absolutely right. The abuse of law is happening, because I'll give you two instances. One, of course, I've already given about, if the Chhattisgarh government had read the dilution of the Supreme Court of the sedition charge, it would have to be completely mad as a hatter to charge a person who complained of a power cut under sedition. And the same applies for the government in Gujarat, because there's one Mr. Dhaval Patel, who's editor of a Gujarat Daily. He criticized the functioning of the Rupani government as far as COVID was concerned, and he was charged with sedition. Now, you can say the government refused to look at the dilution by the Supreme Court, but the fact is both these people spent 2 weeks in the jail. So Sanjay Jha is absolutely right. They're like petrified. They spent 2 weeks in prison for what? So the government can turn around and say, oh, we are very sorry, we will not proceed with the conviction because now we are reading the dilution of the sedition charge by the Supreme Court. You see, the problem is the abuse of the law.
May I just step in for a moment just to respond to this one particular point, and just as a clarification, this is not meant to be an adversarial submission. Just hear me out on this. Abhinav, may I just 30 seconds to paraphrase Anand?
Definitely, go ahead.
So, Section 66A was the previous draconian provision until it was struck down by the Supreme Court in 2015. After the Supreme Court struck down, not read down, struck down means it's been taken off the statute book completely. For the next 3 years, Section 66A was invoked by police departments across the country in several states. Imagine, after the provision has gone off the statute book, it's been done across the board. Okay, so that's one example. Second, the question that I have to ask myself is simply this. Is there no provision of the Indian Penal Code with worser provisions, or let's say with more stringent provisions in terms of fine and imprisonment, that have not been invoked in the worst of circumstances possible where they're not applicable? So for instance, any provision that relates to dowry 498A is the next provision, which is a textbook case of abuse across the country. Provisions relating to sexual harassment have become provisions which have been abused across the board. Therefore, what is it that we are being told? That sedition as a law in Section 124A appears to be the only provision that is prone to this kind of abuse, when the fact of the matter is, across the board, several provisions which have worser consequences for people's personal liberties are being invoked and abused left, right, and center. Therefore, the answer is not to basically say that the provision itself must go out, because then we are throwing the baby out with the bathwater. The problem is that across the board, what the Supreme Court says with respect to any provision ultimately translates to what the beat constable interprets on the street. That is the provision, that is the reality of this particular country. Therefore, when you choose to look at sedition as a provision alone, that is when you look at the data. I would like to ask Mr. Sanjay Jha a simple question. Has he collected or has he seen the data by the NCW or any other body of this particular government, or any of this particular country for that matter, on the abuse of Section 498A or on the abuse of sexual harassment provisions? What is the comparative figure vis-a-vis the abuse of seditious provisions? Let us ask that simple question. Second, I'm very clear that any provision is capable of abuse in the right hands or in the wrong hands. Okay. Yeah. So therefore, I don't think the solution lies in doing away with the concept of sedition. It simply means that the provision must be reworded in accordance with the judicial treatment, so that whatever is the scope that we get to see in the language as it reads today is significantly reduced. That is my limited submission.
Yeah. Sanjay ji, there's a direct question to you. Please respond.
Can I very quickly?
Yeah, I can. I'll take 30 seconds and I'm out. Okay. Very simply put, I don't think anybody on this panel has said that India does not have to have a sedition law that will actually be, employed legally on those who threaten the future of the state. I don't think anybody said that. Every state is vulnerable to having, violent elements who want to overthrow the state. That is a different issue. What we are talking about here is the abuse of the law, which takes away the fundamental right of a citizen. I'll give you an example here, which is very, very pertinent. I mean, think about it, that today in our country, there are many people who get accused of all kinds of violations, hate speech, etc., and they land in jail and they remain in jail. How many people are able to approach the Supreme Court? The question that JSD, as I can see his name on the panel, but Anand and everybody else, the question is that in India, what you need is police reforms. The Supreme Court has already passed a law or its verdict on sedition through many, many judgments. And he's right in saying it's been diluted. But why is it that it's still being interpreted in a way by which an individual's right to freedom of speech is curtailed? You know the reason? Because the police in different states do what they like to do. And therefore, it is the duty of the legal system. The Supreme Court needs to be suo moto here and question the state governments and question the state police officers, because the police in this country is highly, has got an institutional bias. Police in this country is politicized. So the Supreme Court says one thing, but yet at the FIR level, a case can be made against anybody. So I think Mr. JSD has answered the question. The answer lies in the fact of the execution or the way we implement these laws. The Supreme Court will eventually throw it out. I agree. But Abhinav, can you tell me today, if Mr. JSD lands up in jail on a frivolous accusation and he spends 1 month in jail and then his case comes up in the Supreme Court, the harassment to himself, to the family, to everybody else, and many of them get psychologically scarred in a more permanent way. I mean, what are we talking about here? That is the fundamental problem. Let's not bullshit here, please.
Can I very quickly, Abhinav?
Audience question. Yeah, please go ahead. Anand.
Abhinav, I just wanted to make this thing. I wanted to put something which is, because I think Sai made a fantastic point. Which is that even though Supreme Court might dilute it, it took the example of 66A, for 3 years, people were still prosecuting people under that section. But may I put something novel to you, which is that when Sai talked about abuse of law, and I completely agree with him that most of the laws can be abused, are abused. He took the example of dowry laws. But here I put to you that the sedition law is, I dare say, is not abused. It is applied. What I mean to say is that the law itself is so gray and so wrongly worded that it encompasses everything. And that is why the Gujarat government can turn around and say that we are well within our rights. We have not abused the sedition law. We've actually applied the sedition law when we have charged this editor who was criticizing our chief minister, for wrong implementation of COVID. He was criticizing it because the law says whoever by words, either spoken or written, excites and says, excites disaffection towards the government established by law. So the Gujarat government can say, we are not abusing the law, we are applying the law. So the reason is not abuse of sedition law, but it's application of this draconian, wrongly worded, horrendous law.
And Anand, let me add to a point here. Actually, if somebody is not inciting public disorder or not encouraging violence in any sense, it is not an act of sedition. That's the sum and substance of the Supreme Court judgment.
Point taken. So let us take some audience question, please. We have a question. Would you say that the government is intolerant towards the free speech? How does one tangibly monitor this? It's an open question, anyone can answer.
The short answer is yes.
How does one tangibly monitor this? Sai Deepak?
So first point is, I don't think it's possible to monitor all kinds of execution for the simple reason that there is always the possibility of both misapplication and abuse. Therefore, guidelines which the Supreme Court has laid down. So what happens typically in the UK or any other jurisdiction is that the director of prosecutions of a particular state is made aware of the Supreme Court's position with respect to a provision that has been read down or that has been diluted significantly over the years. And it becomes the responsibility of the director of prosecutions to ensure that the diluted position percolates across public prosecutors as well as the police departments down the line, so that that diluted position becomes the new law. That is the first thing. So therefore, at least I am happy that Mr. Jha finally moves from sedition as an issue to police reforms as the primary issue, because that is the question according to me. Because it's very, very convenient when we say this, that India has X number of prosecutions or X number of convictions. The question is, since 2014 until January 2021 or March 2021, please ask yourself the number of times this government has been criticized left, right, and center, and the number of times sedition as a law has been invoked merely for the criticism of the government. So I think the sense of proportion is important for us to ask, in how many instances of criticism has it translated to a question of sedition? That's point number one. Point number two, I think we also need to understand that there is always a possibility
of fallacious argument. I'm sorry, that's a fallacious argument.
I'm sorry, you'll have to let me.
That's a fallacious argument. Are you trying to tell me? Are you trying to tell me that 1 minute? Are you trying to tell me that there will be 1,000 criticisms and therefore 100 special cases is a good idea? I mean, what a ridiculous!
I did not allow anyone.
What a ridiculous proposition is that? No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. This is a ridiculous proposition. It's bizarre.
Sorry,
it's bizarre.
Sanjay sir, this is not a TV debate. I will not allow anyone to disturb anyone.
Come down to the question of police reform. So admit that you've had to make a concession. So relax, take a chill pill. Don't know as much you think you know.
Calm down. Don't try and fool people with any wordsmith business, boss. It doesn't work.
Keep your mouth shut here.
Sai Deepak, please complete your
point. So the point is very, very simple. The point is, as far as the issue in terms of addressing it in terms of execution is concerned, as I said, there are very, very tangible measures that can be undertaken, which is to say what the Supreme Court has specifically laid down as the watered down position of the law needs to be percolated and needs to be informed as much as possible. And second, anyone who is maliciously prosecuted for sedition, given the kind of stigma it gets associated with, must have any kind of recourse for malicious prosecution, for at least in the form of a tortious remedy, so that he can go after the state government. As simple as that. These are the two primary remedies. The citizen must have a remedy against the state for malicious prosecution. Simple.
Abhinav, for the record, that was a hell of a lot of gibberish. That was a hell of a lot of gibberish and hogwash.
Agriculture crop, and in such a way,
it is
what a way they want to sell their crop, but the central government have no right to
Sorry to interrupt, but it is the concurrent. It is in the concurrent list, sir. So it's not just a state subject.
No. Not concurrent. Agriculture is a state subject, absolutely state subject. No concurrent list. And I say, if agriculture is a state subject, let the state liberty to act, make rule and apply rule on their agriculture farmer. If their farmers are happy with their state law, then why the central government want to benefit those farmers who do not need that benefit?
Abhinav, I need to go. You need to unmute yourself. I need to go, Abhinav. I need to go. I got another show.
1 minute, sir, because we are running out of time. So let me come to Krishan ji. Krishan ji, आपके हिसाब से क्या होना चाहिए? ये कैसे इस टूलकिट, सेडिशन, डिसेंट से ऊपर उठ के असली मुद्दों को कैसे सॉल्व किया जाए?
देखिए, पहली बात तो ये है कि जो अभी मेरे भाई कह रहे थे स्टेट सब्जेक्ट होना चाहिए, मेरा उनसे एक आग्रह है कि जो पंजाब सरकार का कॉन्ट्रैक्ट फार्मिंग एक्ट 2013 है, उसमें जो व्यवस्थाएं रखी गई हैं, अप टू 5 लाख पेनल्टी विद इम्प्रिजनमेंट जेल साथ में, उसका कभी विरोध हमारे लोगों को समझ नहीं आई।
That two laws are in under concurrent list. I'm talking only about agriculture subject
की बात कर रहा हूँ। मैं स्टेट पे आ रहा हूँ। तो जो स्टेट ने एक्ट बनाया 2013 में, उस पर कभी कोई आवाज नहीं उठाई, उस पर कभी कोई बात। देखिए, 15 प्रदेशों के अंदर कॉन्ट्रैक्ट फार्मिंग आज हो रही है। किसी किसान की कोई जमीन कहीं छीनी नहीं है। सारे स्टेट्स में मैं जाता हूं, मैं कल भी मध्य प्रदेश में था। तो सवाल ये है कि अगर हम किसानों को ये कहेंगे कि आपकी जमीन छीन जाएगी, तो उसको ये गलत बात हम कर रहे हैं कि आज तक किसी स्टेट में नहीं हुई। और दूसरी बात, जो मंडी की बात पे मैं आ रहा हूं, स्टेट की बात जो हो रही है, मंडी एपीएमसी की थी, एपीएमसी की है, एपीएमसी की रहेंगी। कौन आड़ती उसमें काम करेगा? सब जानते हैं उसका लाइसेंस स्टेट गवर्नमेंट का होता है। प्राइवेट मंडी बनेगी या नहीं बनेगी, उसका लाइसेंस स्टेट गवर्नमेंट देगी। कौन वह काम करेगा मंडी में, ये स्टेट का राइट है। ऐसा नहीं है, ये समझने की बात है। फिर हम क्या कर रहे हैं, हम किस बात को कैसे लेके चल रहे हैं, क्यों हम मिसगाइड कर रहे हैं। कानून को समझने की कोशिश हमको करनी चाहिए, हर बिंदु पर हमको बात करनी चाहिए। एमएसपी जैसे अभी तक प्रोक्योरमेंट था, वैसे प्रोक्योरमेंट बढ़ रहा है। एमएसपी A2 + FL + 50% पर ये सरकार ने किया है, बराबर बढ़ा रहे हैं। ये खरीद हो रही है, खरीद में कोई कमी नहीं है, खरीद बराबर बढ़ रही है, पहले के अगर मुकाबले में करें तो खरीद बढ़ रही है। तीसरा पॉइंट आता है कि जो एग्रो प्रोसेसिंग यूनिट्स हैं वो खरीद करेंगी सीधे किसानों से, अभी तक उनको कोई अधिकार नहीं था। अगर फ्लोर मिल भी गांव में आटा चक्की थी, वो भी सीधे नहीं खरीद, उत्तर प्रदेश में नहीं खरीद सकते थे, वो मंडी के लोग तुरंत वहां जाके खड़े हो जाते थे कि तेरा आटी चक्की सील कर दूंगा। तो ये जो व्यवस्थाएं हैं ये किसान की चॉइस है, वो एपीएमसी में बेचे, वो बाहर बेचे ना बेचे, खेत में बेचे, ये एक अलग चीज है। लेकिन एक बात कहेंगे, हमारी किसानों की दिए जाए,
किसान बिल पे ये बात नहीं है, ये बात थी कि रास्ता क्या हो आगे इसका। संजय जी आप कुछ कहना चाह रहे थे?
देखिए विकल्प ये है कि जो गांव में 86% आदमी है उसके लिए विकल्पों की जरूरत है। ऐसा नहीं है उसका शोषण हुआ है और शोषण करने वाली ताकतों से उसको मुक्ति मिलनी चाहिए, उसका भी इस देश में कोई अधिकार है। ठीक है वो बहुत गरीब आदमी है, उसके पास बहुत रिसोर्सेज नहीं है, उसका पैसा नहीं, लेकिन वो अपने परिवार के लिए भी पैदा करता है, थोड़ा बचता है तो वो देश के लिए पैदा करता है। तो मेरा ये मानना है और तमाम अब तक मांग रही विकल्प होना चाहिए, मर्जी होनी चाहिए, और कॉन्ट्रैक्ट फार्मिंग कोई जबरदस्ती नहीं है। तीसरी बात आती है एमएसपी जैसे था वैसे है
जी, आपका पॉइंट
ये 3-4 पॉइंट
देखो। अभिनव, कैन आई मेक अ पॉइंट?
Abhinav ji,
2 issues.
Okay, so I'm being told 1 minute is left. So Anand Ranganathan, could you please?
Yeah, very quickly, just to clarify on the gentleman who was saying that agriculture is a state subject. Number 33, I just want to clarify on the concurrent list. There are a hell of a lot of things in agriculture that come under the concurrent list. So he's factually wrong. But you know, the issue, the topic is about.
For example, what part of agriculture?
Production of cotton, production of so many oil seeds, production of trade of farming. There are so many things. Please.
Yeah.
Let's
Thank you, Abhinav. I need to go.
Only trading. Production.
Thank you, Abhinav. I need to go.
No production.
What we need to do?
Production and sale, no.
Sir, I have just read the. Anyway, Abhinav, very briefly, just one line because you asked about of speech expression. मैं ये कहूंगा कि जिसका दम नहीं घुटता इस देश में वो दम नहीं लेता।
फेयर पॉइंट आनंद। सो बेसिकली हमें करना क्या है कि जो पक्ष में है, जो विपक्ष में है, उनको साथ में बैठ के कोई टूल किट बनानी चाहिए कि आगे का रास्ता कैसे हो। वो यहाँ पे चर्चा देश में नहीं होती है, बाकी सारी चर्चाएं हो रही है। बट थैंक यू पैनलिस्ट फॉर दिस वंडरफुल डिस्कशन। इट्स अ लॉन्ग टॉपिक, इट कैन नॉट बी डिस्कस्ड इन one hour, but hoping to see you again, and thank you audience for listening to us.
Thanks Abhinav, marvelously moderated. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.